The rain hammered the tin roof of Wade Grim Caldwell's trailer like a relentless drumbeat, each drop echoing the isolation of the Black Timber Motorcycle Club's outskirts. It was 2:17 a.m., the kind of hour where the world felt too quiet, too empty, and the desert wind whispered secrets through the scrub brush. Wade, 44 and weathered like old leather, stirred in his bunk, his tattooed arms heavy from a night of solitary whiskey. The knock came faint at first, hesitant, almost swallowed by the storm, then insistent, a small fist against the warped door. He swung his legs off the bed, boots hitting the creaky floorboards, and grabbed the baseball bat leaning nearby. Out here, visitors at this hour meant trouble. He cracked the door, the cold rain slicing in like a blade, and there she stood, a girl no more than 10, drenched to the bone, her dark hair plastered to her pale face like wet vines. Water streamed from her oversized hoodie, pooling at her sneakers, and in her trembling hands she clutched a laminated photo pressed tight against her chest as if it were a shield. Her eyes, wide and shadowed by fear, locked onto his. No words at first, just the patter of rain and her shallow breaths cutting through the downpour. Wade's grip tightened on the bat, his mind racing. Lost kid? Runaway? But something in her stance, the way she didn't flinch from his scarred face or the club's patch on his vest, held him frozen. She didn't wait for an invitation. With a shiver that rattled her whole frame, she thrust the photo forward, the plastic slick and gleaming under the trailer's dim porch light. Wade's eyes dropped to it, and the world tilted. The image showed a younger man, him, but not as grim, the enforcer who'd buried his past under miles of blacktop and bad decisions. This was Wade from 15 years back, clean-shaven, smiling beside a woman with laughing eyes, both of them in faded jeans at some dusty roadside diner. The tattoo on his forearm, a snarling wolf cradling a star, matched the one inked on his skin now, faded but unmistakable. His knees buckled. He caught himself on the doorframe, the bat clattering to the floor, as a sob choked in his throat. That photo was from the one summer he'd tried to walk away from the life, the club, the deals, the shadows. He'd failed, of course, but he'd left that version of himself behind, like roadkill. The girl, Sadie, her name would come later, spoke then, her voice small but steady, cutting through the storm like a siren's call. My mom said if I was ever in danger, I had to find you. She said you'd never leave me. Wade stared, his mind a whirlwind of rain and regret. Danger? Who was this kid? He shook his head, rain dripping from his beard. I don't know your mom, sweetheart. You gotta get inside before you freeze. But even as he stepped aside, letting her slip past into the warm glow of the trailer, doubt gnawed at him. Her chin had a tiny dimple just like his sister's used to, and the way she held that photo, fierce, protective, stirred something buried deep. Sadie didn't sit, didn't shake off the wet. She stood in the middle of the cramped space, the scent of damp earth and fear mingling with the stale coffee on the counter. Her name's Erin Hart. She's 33. She went missing 3 days ago. The words landed like punches, each one forcing Wade to replay fragments of memory. Erin. A face from a dive bar in Reno, years ago. Waitress with fire in her eyes, cornered by a sleazy boss who'd grabbed her wrist too hard. Wade had intervened that night, not with fists, but with presence. The club shadow enough to make the man back off. He'd slipped her cash, a burner phone with the Black Timber emergency line. For if things go south, he'd said, we're not saints, but we keep our word. She'd thanked him with a smile that lingered in his dreams for weeks, but he'd ridden out at dawn, leaving no traces. Could that be her? The timeline fit too damn well. As Sadie peeled off her hoodie, revealing bruises blooming like dark flowers on her arms, marks of rough hands, not falls, Wade's stomach twisted. Men came to our house. she whispered, eyes downcast. 2 nights ago. Big guys. Yelling about a brown folder. Mom shoved me out the back window with this. She tapped the photo, told me to run to the old truck stop, find the man with the wolf tattoo. Grim. That's you, right? Wade nodded slowly, the pieces slamming together. The folder, whatever it held, had drawn blood. Erin's voice echoed in his head from that long-ago night. You're a good man under all that ink. A promise he'd made to himself then, to protect the innocent when the world chewed them up. But this was personal, a ghost from his attempt at normalcy crashing back. He knelt to her level, the floorboards groaning under his weight, and gently took the photo. The wolf's eyes seemed to stare back, accusing. Sadie, he said, the name feeling right on his tongue, I'm gonna help you. We'll find your mom. But as he said it, details sharpened. The curve of her ears, the stubborn set of her jaw mirroring his own in old mirrors. Blood of his blood? The thought hit like thunder, impossible yet insistent. He'd walked away from Erin without a backward glance, but life had a way of circling back on 2 wheels. By 3 a.m., Wade had Sadie wrapped in one of his old flannels, sipping hot cocoa from a chipped mug. The rain eased to a drizzle, but the storm inside him raged. He couldn't do this alone. The club was his spine, his shield. We're going to the clubhouse, he told her, voice low and firm. Safe there. No one's touching you. She nodded, trust flickering in her eyes like a spark in the dark. As he fired up his Harley, the engine's roar drowning the night's whispers, Wade felt the weight of that old promise settle on his shoulders. One look at the photo had cracked him open, but fulfilling it, that would demand everything. Honor, blood, maybe his last shot at redemption. The road to the clubhouse wound through shadowed pines, headlights cutting fog like knives. Wade glanced back at Sadie in the sidecar he'd rigged years ago for quick runs, her small form huddled against the wind. The black timber compound loomed ahead, a fortress of steel and loyalty under the paling sky. Curtis "Bear" Nolan, the president at 56, broad as an oak and twice as rooted, would have questions. But Wade knew the code, family first, chosen or not. As the gates creaked open, the first hints of dawn gilded the horizon, promising a ride that would test them all. Word count, 872. The gates of the black timber clubhouse groaned open under the weight of rusted chains, their metallic screech slicing through the early morning mist like a warning. Wade throttled down his Harley, the engine's low rumble fading into the hush of the compound, where rows of bikes stood sentinel under sodium lights that buzzed faintly overhead. Sadie clung to the sidecar's edge, her eyes darting at the shadows cast by the low-slung buildings. Garage bays, a communal hall, and the president's quarters tucked behind a wall of stacked tires. The air smelled of pine resin and motor oil, sharp against the lingering damp of the rain. And Wade felt the familiar pull of home, even as dread coiled in his gut. This place had been his anchor through wars unspoken, but bringing a child here, that shattered the code in ways he couldn't yet name. Curtis "Bear" Nolan emerged from the main hall before Wade could kill the ignition, his massive frame filling the doorway like a boulder in a stream. At 56, Bear was the club's unyielding heart, his grey-streaked beard framing a face etched with lines from too many sunrises over bad news. He wore his cut over a faded flannel, arms crossed, eyes narrowing at the unusual sight of the sidecar passenger. Grim, he rumbled, voice like gravel under tires. You look like you've seen a ghost, or dragged one in. His gaze flicked to Sadie, softening just a fraction, enough to reveal the father he'd once been, before the road claimed his own blood. Wade dismounted, boots crunching on the gravel, and helped Sadie out with a gentleness that surprised even him. Her small hand in his felt fragile, a reminder of stakes higher than club runs or turf scraps. "Bear, this is Sadie. She's in trouble. Her mum's gone missing, and it ties back to something old." He pulled the laminated photo from his vest pocket, handing it over as they stepped into the hall. The interior was a cocoon of warmth. Wood-panelled walls hung with patches and faded photos of rides past, the air thick with the scent of strong coffee brewing on a hot plate. A few early risers, Jax, the wiry mechanic with grease-stained knuckles, and Lena, the club's unofficial medic, a no-nonsense nurse in her 40s, glanced up from the long oak table, curiosity etching their faces. Bear took the photo, his thick fingers careful, and studied it under the hanging lamp's yellow glow. The younger Wade stared back, frozen in that moment of fleeting hope, and Bear's brow furrowed. "This you? Hell, Grim, you were almost human back then." A low chuckle escaped him, but it died quick when Sadie spoke up from Wade's side, her voice threading the tension like a needle. "That's my mom with him. Erin. She said Grim would help because he promised." The room stilled. The coffee pots dripped the only sound. As eyes turned to the girl, Wade felt exposed, the photo a key unlocking doors he'd bolted shut. He explained in clipped words. The knock in the storm, the bruises on her arms like echoes of violence, the men hunting a brown folder. Erin's face from memory overlapped with the photo, igniting fragments. Her laugh over greasy fries, the way she touched his arm when he handed over that burner phone, a promise made in the dim light of a diner to stand as a shield if the world turned cruel. Bear set the photo down, his jaw tightening like a vice. "Lockdown then, no one in or out till we know more." He clapped his hands once, sharp as a gunshot, and the hall stirred to life. Jax radioed the perimeter guards, his voice crackling over the walkie-talkie, while Lena guided Sadie to a side room with a blanket and a bowl of oatmeal, her touch maternal, whispering assurances that cut through the girl's guarded silence. Wade watched them go, a pang hitting him square, Sadie's dimpled chin catching the light, the same stubborn tilt to her head. Was it possible? That summer fling, the nights blurred by hope and haste, ending with him riding away at dawn. No goodbyes, no traces, but life had a cruel arithmetic adding up what he'd left behind. By 4 a.m., the clubhouse hummed with purpose, a machine oiled by loyalty. Bear gathered the core members in the back office, a cramped space lined with maps and ledgers, the air heavy with cigar smoke from nights long past. Wade paced the worn rug, recounting Sadie's story, the invasion, the folder, the flight through the rain. "It's gotta be tied to that Reno mess," he said, voice low. Years back, the club had skirted edges of construction deals gone sour, shady contracts for desert highways, whispers of kickbacks to badges on the take. Wade had pulled Erin from that world, but if she'd kept records, proof of the rot, it explained the hunters. Bear leaned back in his creaky chair, fingers drumming the desk. "We ride for answers. Jax, check the old contacts in town. Discreet. Grim, you and me hit Erin's last known spot. If this folder's real, it's bigger than one woman. It's poison in the veins of everything we stand for." Wade nodded, but his mind snagged on Sadie, now dozing under Lena's watch, her small chest rising and falling in the bunkroom's dim light. The thought of her as his, blood calling to blood, stirred a fear deeper than any brawl. He'd buried fatherhood under layers of regret, convinced the road left no room for roots. Yet here she was, a living echo of the man in the photo, trusting him with eyes that mirrored his own hidden storms. As dawn's first rays pierced the blinds, painting gold streaks across the floor, Wade stepped out for air, the compound's gravel cool underfoot. The bikes gleamed in the light. Engines silent but ready, a testament to the family he'd chosen when blood had failed him. The call came just after, a burner buzzing in Bear's pocket. anonymous, urgent. Hart's place was tossed, signs of a struggle, but no body. Wade's heart seized, the words blurring the line between protector and something more. He couldn't lose her before he even knew. With the club mobilizing, scouts fanning out like wolves on the scent, Wade felt the old promise ignite, a fire that would burn through corruption and doubt alike. Honor demanded he ride, for Erin, for Sadie, for the redemption he'd long thought lost to the dust. And now I invite you to leave in the comments where you're watching from and the exact hour you heard this story. We wish to know how far these northern confessions travel and at what moments they reach you. The sun crested the jagged peaks like a reluctant witness, casting long shadows across the black timber compound as the engines roared to life. Wade stood at the edge of the gravel lot, the chill morning air biting through his leather cut, carrying the faint tang of dew-kissed sagebrush. His Harley idled beside him, a faithful beast vibrating under his hands, but his eyes were fixed on the bunkroom window where Sadie slept. Lena had drawn the curtains, but a sliver of light slipped through, illuminating the curve of her cheek in peaceful repose. The girl's trust in him, a fragile thread woven from her mother's words, pulled at something raw inside. A paternal instinct he'd never claimed but couldn't deny. Was she his? The question hung like exhaust smoke, blurring the line between duty and destiny. Bear clapped a heavy hand on Wade's shoulder, grounding him. We ride now, Grim. Answers won't find themselves. The president's voice cut through the revving motors, steady as the club's ironclad code. Around them the core riders assembled, Jax on his customized chopper, tools jangling in his saddlebags, Marco, the quiet veteran with scars from desert storms, checking his sidearm holster out of habit, and a half-dozen others, their cuts patched with the wolf and star emblem that bound them tighter than blood. No fanfare, just the ritual of purpose, the snap of visors, the creak of leather, the shared nods that spoke volumes. This wasn't a joyride, it was a hunt for truth, rooted in the promise Wade had made long ago to shield the vulnerable from the world's underbelly. They split into pairs, tires spitting gravel as the convoy peeled out, heading toward the dusty outskirts where Erin Hart's modest home sat like a forgotten outpost. Wade rode point with Bear, the wind whipping his beard, Sadie's photo tucked inside his vest, like a talisman against the rising doubt. The road unfurled in a ribbon of cracked asphalt, flanked by scrub and distant mesas that glowed amber in the light. Memories surfaced unbidden. That Reno diner, the sizzle of bacon on the grill, Erin's hand brushing his as she poured coffee. He'd seen the fear in her eyes then, pinned under her boss's shadow, a man tied to the same crooked deals that had tempted Wade years before. Slipping her that phone number had been his quiet rebellion, a vow to the better man he'd glimpsed in himself. Now it circled back, demanding payment in full. The house came into view after 20 miles, a squat rancher with peeling paint and a chain-link fence sagging under years of neglect. No car in the drive, just an overturned flower pot spilling dirt like spilled secrets, and the front door ajar, swaying gently in the breeze. Wade killed his engine first, the silence amplifying the creak of the gate as they approached. Bear signaled the others to fan out, eyes scanning for tails or traps, while Jax knelt by the porch, his flashlight beam dancing over scuff marks in the dust, bootprints too large for Erin, too deliberate for accident. Struggle here, Jax muttered, voice low, tracing the gouges without touching. Wade's pulse quickened, the air thick with the metallic scent of fear, long faded, mingled with the faint rot of overturned trash bins. Inside, the chaos told its story in shattered fragments. A lamp base cracked on the floor, its shade crumpled like a discarded plea. Kitchen chairs upended, drawers yanked open and rifled through. Wade moved through the living room, boots careful on the splintered wood, his gloved hand brushing a framed photo on the mantel, Erin and Sadie at a county fair, cotton candy smiles frozen in time. No blood, No overt signs of harm, but the absence screamed louder. The brown folder Sadie mentioned was gone. Its secrets vanished with whoever had taken Erin. In the bedroom, Wade found a child's drawing taped to the mirror, stick figures of a family under a smiling sun, labeled Mom, Me, and the Wolfman in wobbly crayon. His throat tightened. The wolf, crude but unmistakable, echoed his tattoo. How much had Erin told her? Enough to send Sadie into the storm, enough to forge this bond across years. Bear rifled through a desk in the corner, pulling out crumpled bills and a stack of letters, overdue notices, hints of a life scraping by. "She was holding on," he said, voice gruff with empathy. "But this—" He held up a torn receipt from a local print shop, dated 3 days prior, copies of documents, quantity unspecified, folders key, construction bids, maybe payoffs, ties to that sheriff's deputy we crossed paths with last year. Hale, the one with the silver tongue and dirty hands. Wade nodded, the pieces aligning like gears in a well-oiled machine. The club had steered clear of those deals, but echoes lingered. Corruption in the highways meant rigged contracts, displaced families, lives ground under for profit. Erin must have stumbled into it, perhaps as a clerk or witness, gathering proof to fight back. Her disappearance wasn't random, it was erasure. A shout from outside pulled them back, Marco waving from the shed, his face taut. He'd found a hidden compartment in the wall, pried open, a single USB drive, overlooked in the haste. Wade took it, the small device cool in his palm, a digital lifeline. "We get this to Lena's contact at the safe house," Bear decided, pocketing it. "Tech guy owes us. But Grim, this pulls us deep. Hale's got badges and builders in his pocket. Raiding Erin's place means they're desperate." Wade's jaw set, the weight of command settling heavier. The club lived by justice outside the law's blind eye, honoring promises that the system broke, but risking the brotherhood for one woman's fight, for a girl who might be his. It tested the edges of loyalty, forcing him to weigh the chosen family against the blood he might have sired. As they mounted up, the sun climbing higher, casting harsh light on the ransacked home, Wade's mind raced ahead to Sadie. He'd left her with instructions. Stay put. Trust Lena, no wandering. But the ride back stirred a deeper fear, not of the hunters, but of failing her as he'd failed Erin. The convoy thundered down the highway, dust trails marking their path like war paint, the USB a burning coal in Bear's vest. Redemption wasn't a straight road. It twisted through moral quagmires, demanding sacrifices that echoed long after the engines fell silent. Wade glanced at the horizon, where thunderheads gathered like unspoken threats, knowing the real storm was just beginning, one that would force him to claim the fatherhood he'd fled, or lose it all to the shadows. The compound gates clanged shut behind the convoy, the echo reverberating through the pines like a final punctuation on the morning's hunt. Wade dismounted his Harley with a stiffness in his joints that had nothing to do with the ride, the USB drive now a heavy secret in his pocket, transferred from Bear's keeping. The sun hung midway in the sky, its light filtering through the branches in dappled patterns that danced across the gravel, but the warmth did little to thaw the chill settling in his bones. Dust from the tires settled slowly, mingling with the scent of heated metal and sage. As the riders dispersed, Jax heading to the garage with a nod, Marco scanning the perimeter with eyes honed by old wars. Sadie emerged from the bunk room then, rubbing sleep from her eyes, her flannel shirt hanging loose like a borrowed flag of safety. Seeing her, whole and waiting, twisted something in Wade's chest, a mix of relief and the gnawing uncertainty of what the day might unearth. Lena met them at the hall door, her arms crossed over her nurse's scrubs, face a mask of quiet concern. "She's been asking for you," she said to Wade, jerking her chin toward Sadie. The girl hesitated at the threshold, clutching a stuffed bear Lena must have found in storage. Its fur matted from years of disuse. "Did you find her? Mom?" Sadie's voice was a whisper, laced with the fragile hope of dawn, but Wade could only shake his head, kneeling to meet her gaze. The dimple in her chin caught the light again, a mirror to his own, and he fought the urge to trace it with a calloused finger. "Not yet, kiddo, but we're closer. Got something that might bring her home." He pulled the USB from his pocket, holding it up like a promise etched in plastic. Her eyes widened, recognition flickering. Perhaps Erin had mentioned such things in hushed bedtime stories. Bear ushered them inside, the hall now alive with the low murmur of voices and the clatter of mugs on the oak table. The air carried the rich aroma of fresh brew, grounding the tension that hummed like an idling engine. He gathered the inner circle in the back office once more, the space feeling smaller under the weight of new stakes. Jax plugged the drive into an old laptop scavenged from club runs, its fan whirring to life as the screen flickered blue. "This better not be encrypted," Jax grumbled, fingers flying over the keys. Grease from the morning's work smudging the edges. Wade sat beside Sadie on a worn couch, her small frame leaning into him instinctively, the warmth of her shoulder against his arm, stirring echoes of a life he'd never lived. The others, Lena hovering nearby, Marco leaning against the wall with arms folded, watched in silence. The room thick with the unspoken bond that had forged the Black Timber into more than a club, a bulwark against the world's cruelties. The files opened in a cascade of documents, scans of contracts yellowed at the edges, emails threaded with coded language, spreadsheets tallying figures that screamed graft. Erin's notes, handwritten in tight script, wove through it all. Timelines of rigged bids for desert infrastructure, names of contractors pocketing funds meant for roads that never materialized, and at the center, Deputy Harlan Hale, his signature a serpent's coil on falsified approvals. "She was building a case," Bear rumbled, scrolling through a photo of a ledger page, the ink faded but damning. Waitress by day, whistleblower by night, must have crossed paths with Hale's crew, maybe overheard something at the diner, started digging. Wade's mind reeled back to that Reno night, Erin's eyes darting to the back booth where suits like Hale's ilk huddled over maps and whispers. He'd pulled her from the boss's grasp, but the shadows ran deeper, tendrils reaching into towns like theirs, corrupting the very ground they rode. One file hit harder, a personal journal entry dated months after their parting. Erin's words spilled across the screen, the fear of raising a child alone, the quiet resolve to name her after the strength she'd glimpsed in a stranger with a wolf tattoo. And then the gut punch, a paternity test result, grainy but conclusive, linking Sadie's DNA to Wade's from a sample Erin had secretly obtained during their brief time together. The room blurred for Wade, the laptop's glow casting harsh shadows on his face as he read it twice, 3 times. His daughter. Not a maybe, not a ghost from a photo, but blood. Real and reaching for him across the years. Sadie peered at the screen, her brow furrowing. "What's that say about me?" she asked, voice small in the heavy quiet. Wade swallowed hard, pulling her close, the scent of her hair, faint shampoo and innocence grounding him. "It says, your family, Sadie. Mine." Bear closed the laptop with a decisive snap, his eyes meeting Wade's in a look that bridged decades of brotherhood. "This changes the ride. Hale's not just dirty, he's cornered. That folder, or what's left on this drive, could topple his empire, but he'll come hunting and not alone." The warning hung, laced with the moral fire that defined them. Justice not through vengeance, but through exposing the rot that preyed on the weak. Lena stepped forward, her voice steady. "I'll get word to my contact at the community center, old lawyer who hates badges like Hale. But we need proof airtight, or it's our necks." Marco nodded, cracking his knuckles. "Perimeter's tight, but if they hit, we hold. For her." He glanced at Sadie, the club's quiet vow wrapping around her like armor. As the group dispersed to fortify, Jax reinforcing locks, Lena prepping a go-bag with medical supplies, Wade lingered with Sadie in the hall. The afternoon light slanting through high windows in golden shafts. He showed her the tattoo on his arm, the wolf cradling its star, and told her fragments of the past. The diner, the promise, the man he'd tried to be. Her questions came soft, probing the edges of his regrets, and in answering, Wade felt the weight lift, redemption threading through the scars. But outside, the wind picked up, carrying the distant rumble of thunder, a harbinger of the confrontation brewing. Hale's web was vast, but the Black Timber's loyalty was vaster still, a chosen family rising to honor a vow that time couldn't erode. Wade stood taller, the father he'd denied awakening, ready to ride into the storm for the daughter fate had returned. If this story's gripping you, hit that like button. It helps spread these tales of honor and heart far and wide. The afternoon sun dipped lower, painting the Black Timber compound in hues of burnt orange and shadow, as if the desert itself were holding its breath. Wade sat on the worn steps of the main hall, the rough wood biting into his palms, while Sadie perched beside him, her small legs swinging just above the gravel. The air hummed with the distant whine of Jax's tools from the garage, sharpening chains and bolstering gates. But here in this pocket of quiet, the world narrowed to the two of them. Sadie's stuffed bear lay forgotten in her lap, its button eyes staring blankly at the horizon, where thunderheads swelled like bruises on the sky. Wade traced the edge of his tattoo with a thumb, the wolf's form a constant under his sleeve, now a bridge to the girl who'd upended his solitary life. "Your mom. She was tough," he said, voice gravelly from the dust of the day's ride. Saw it in her eyes that night at the diner, like she could stare down a storm. Sadie tilted her head, the dimple in her chin deepening as she studied him. Her dark eyes, his eyes, searching for the father hidden in the lines of his face. "She told me stories about you. Not all, but enough. Said you fixed things when they broke bad." Her words landed soft, weaving through the breeze that carried the scent of impending rain and warmed earth. Wade felt the pull of that old promise, the one he'd whispered to Erin over cooling coffee, to be the shield she needed. But now, with the USB's secrets burning a hole in his vest, it extended to this child, his child, demanding he step from the shadows of regret into the light of action. He reached out, hesitating before resting a hand on her shoulder, the contact tentative, like testing ice over deep water. She didn't pull away. Instead, she leaned in, a silent acceptance that cracked the armor he'd worn for years. Inside the hall, the planning unfolded like a war council etched in smoke and resolve. Bear paced the oak table, his massive frame casting long shadows under the hanging lamps, while Lena spread maps across the scarred surface, faded blueprints of the town's underbelly, marked with pins for Hale's known haunts, the sheriff's outpost, a derelict warehouse by the rail yards, and the construction yard where the crooked deals festered. Marco leaned over a radio, tuning frequencies for any chatter from the badgers, his scarred fingers steady despite the storm brewing in his eyes. Jax had cracked more files from the USB, projecting grainy images onto the wall with an old beamer, ledgers of siphoned funds, photos of kickback meetings under sodium lights, Erin's annotations circling Hale's name like a noose. "She's got timestamps," Jax said, pointing to a digital trail. "Proves he rerouted road contracts to his cronies, millions vanishing into ghost projects, leaving families like hers in the dust. If we leak this right, it buries him." Bear's fist came down light, a controlled thud that echoed their unyielding code. "We don't leak blind. Hale's got eyes everywhere, deputies on payroll, builders who'd sell their souls for a cut. Erin's alive. The drive's proof she's a threat they missed. We find her first, get her testimony, then hit with the full weight. His gaze shifted to Wade, heavy with the trust of brothers forged in fire. Grim, your lead on this. It's your blood in the fight now. Wade nodded, the weight settling like a saddle on bareback, but beneath it stirred a fierce clarity. Fatherhood wasn't a title. It was this, riding into the fray for the ones who'd claimed him, chosen or born. The club murmured agreement, their loyalty a tapestry of shared scars. Marco's from overseas sands. Lena's from hospital shifts saving lives the law ignored. Jax's from engines that had carried them through hell. This was their family, woven from promises that outlasted rust and rain. As dusk crept in, fingers of purple staining the sky, a low rumble broke the compound's rhythm, not thunder but engines on the approach road. Wade tensed, hand drifting to the knife at his belt. As Bear signaled the perimeter watch, headlights pierced the gloom, 3 pickups rolling slow, dust swirling in their wake like ghosts stirred to life. They halted at the gates, and out stepped a figure Wade recognized from the files. Tommy Vance, a mid-level contractor with a paunch and a smirk that screamed bought loyalty. Flanked by 2 roughnecks in flannel, he raised his hands in mock surrender, but his eyes darted, calculating. "Heard you boys are asking questions," Vance called, voice oily over the idling motors. "About a missing lady and some papers. Hale sends regards, says it's club business best left alone." Bear stepped forward, the gate chain rattling in his grip, his presence a wall of unmovable honor. "We don't take messages from snakes. Tell your boss the Black Timber keeps its word. Erin's one of ours now." Vance's smirk faltered, glancing at the armed silhouettes emerging from the shadows, club members materializing like wolves from the woods. Wade moved to Bear's side, Sadie's safety flashing in his mind, a fire urging restraint over rage. No guns drawn, no fists flying. Their justice was poetic, rooted in exposure, not blood. "You got a choice, Vance," Wade said, his tone low, carrying the weight of the drive's evidence. "Walk away clean, or we ride this truth straight to every door in town. Your calls, Hale's empire crumbles either way." The standoff stretched, tension coiling like a spring, the air thick with exhaust and unspoken threats. Vance's men shifted, hands twitching toward hips, but the club's unified front, silent, steadfast, held them frozen. Finally, Vance spat into the dirt, backing toward his truck. "This ain't over. Hale plays dirty." The engines revved, taillights fading into the twilight, leaving the compound in watchful quiet. Bear turned to Wade, a grim nod passing between them. "They're rattled. Means we're close." Inside, Lena gathered Sadie for the night, tucking her into a bunk with stories of brave riders, while Wade lingered by the window, the USB now copied and hidden in multiple safes. The confrontation had been a probe, a test of their resolve, but it ignited the moral fire. Corruption thrived in silence, but loyalty roared louder. Night fell fully, stars pricking the velvet sky like distant promises as Wade slipped out to the garage alone. The Harley's frame gleamed under the worklight, tools laid out for the dawn ride. He thought of Erin, held somewhere in Hale's web, her fire undimmed, of Sadie sleeping with dreams of reunion. The father in him, newly awakened, whispered of sacrifice, the kind that built legacies from quiet acts of courage. Tomorrow, they'd infiltrate the warehouse, guided by the drive's clues, facing the heart of the rot with honor as their blade. The wind sighed through the pines, carrying the faint patter of first raindrops, a cleansing herald. Wade revved the engine once, the roar a vow renewed. For the family he'd lost and found, he'd ride through the storm, redeeming the man the photo had captured long ago. The moon hung low over the Black Timber compound, a silver sliver casting ethereal glows on the rain-slicked gravel, where puddles mirrored the stars like fractured promises. Wade wiped grease from his hands on a rag, the sharp scent of oil and metal clinging to his skin as he tightened the last bolt on his Harley's chain. The garage's fluorescent hum was a solitary companion, broken only by the patter of rain, accelerating into a steady drum on the tin roof. Sleep had evaded him since the standoff with Vance, his mind replaying the contractor's oily retreat, the way the taillights had swallowed into the night like retreating predators. Tomorrow's ride to the warehouse loomed, a shadowed gamble guided by the USB's digital breadcrumbs, blueprints of Hale's lair, timestamps of late-night shipments that hid more than construction gear. But tonight, the weight of fatherhood pressed heavier than any saddlebag, Sadie's trusting face etched in his thoughts like a brand. He stepped out into the downpour, the cool drops needling his face, washing away the day's grime but not the doubt. The compound lay hushed, perimeter lights flickering like wary eyes, the club's sentries nodding as he passed toward the bunkhouse. Inside, the air was warm with the faint aroma of chamomile tea Lena had brewed for Sadie, a ritual to chase nightmares. The girl stirred as Wade eased the door open, her small form curled under a quilt patched from old club banners, the stuffed bear clutched tight. Moonlight slanted through the blinds, illuminating the soft rise of her chest, and Wade paused in the doorway, the sight stirring a fierce protectiveness that bordered on ache. She'd asked for stories earlier, probing his past with questions that peeled back layers he'd long armored. "Did you ever get scared?" she'd whispered, and he'd admitted it. Fear of failing, of the road's endless pull away from roots. Now, watching her sleep, he vowed silently, no more running. The promise to Erin, to the man in the photo, extended here, to this blood tie fate had knotted unbreakable. Bear found him there, the president's heavy footsteps muffled on the carpet, a steaming mug in hand. "Can't sleep either." Bear's voice was a low rumble, laced with the empathy of shared burdens. He handed Wade the coffee, black and bitter, the steam curling like unspoken worries. They settled on the porch steps, rain sheeting off the eaves in silver curtains, the scent of wet pine sharp in the air. "Vance was a messenger," Bear continued, staring into the dark. "Hale's testing waters, seeing if we'll fold. But that drive, it's dynamite. Erin's notes name names, suppliers, deputies, even a judge who's looked the other way on rigged inspections. She's not just missing, she's the spark that could burn his whole operation." Wade sipped the coffee, its heat grounding him, but his mind snagged on Sadie. If we pull this off, what then? Clubs exposed, and her. Our girls in the crosshairs. The word "our" slipped out, natural as breathing, sealing the bond in the quiet night. Bear's hand clapped his shoulder, firm and reassuring, the gesture a cornerstone of their chosen brotherhood. "Then we stand, black timbers built on promises like yours, kept through storms worse than this. Remember '08, the raid on the mill. We lost Jax's brother but exposed the traffickers. Honor's our road, Grim. It don't bend." Memories flickered, the roar of engines in pursuit, the moral fire that had forged them from outcasts into guardians. Wade nodded, the rain's rhythm syncing with his resolve, but a distant crackle over Bear's radio shattered the moment. Marco's voice, terse and urgent. "Movement on the East Trail. 2 vehicles, no lights. Could be scouts." Adrenaline surged, sharpening the world. Wade set the mug down, the porcelain clinking like a starting pistol. They moved as one, alerting the watch without waking Sadie, the compound stirring like a beast rousing from slumber. The intruders never breached the gates. Jax's traps, motion sensors tied to floodlights, blazed to life, illuminating 2 sedans mired in mud, their tires spinning futilely as club riders encircled them on bikes. Engines growling warnings. Wade rode flank, the rain stinging his visor, heart pounding with the precision of old instincts. The drivers bailed, hands high, faces pale under the glare, low-level enforcers, faces from the USB photos, reeking of cheap cologne and desperation. "Hale wants the girl," one stammered, eyes darting to the compound's fortified walls. "Says she knows too much." Wade's blood ran cold, the threat coiling like barbed wire, but Bear's command held them steady. No blows, just zip ties and a warning etched in steel. "Tell your boss the hunt ends tomorrow. Truth rides harder than fear." The men were cut loose at the county line, their retreat a testament to the club's unyielding code. Justice through exposure, not the shadows Hale favored. Dawn broke grey and sodden, the rain easing to mist as the core team prepped for the warehouse run. Wade checked Sadie's bunk one last time, her eyes heavy-lidded but bright with unspoken worry. "Promise you'll bring her back?" she asked, voice threading the air like a plea. He knelt, the floor creaking, and cupped her face gently, thumb brushing that shared dimple. "On my word, kiddo, Wolf's honor." The tattoo seemed to pulse under his sleeve, a living vow. Lena stayed behind as guardian, her medic bag stocked, while Marco rigged decoys, dummy bikes to draw any tails. The convoy rolled out at first light, 5 Harleys slicing through the fog-shrouded highway, the warehouse a hulking silhouette 10 miles out, its corrugated walls hiding Hale's graft like a thief's den. They approached low and silent, parking in a dry wash to scout. The air hummed with the distant clank of machinery, the metallic tang of rust and diesel heavy on the breeze. Jax hacked the outer camera feed from a tablet, grainy images revealing guards patrolling chain-link perimeters, crates stacked like secrets in the yard. Erin's signal. "Burner phone ping from last night," he whispered, pointing to a side building. Wade's pulse thrummed, the infiltration a dance of shadows, Marco cutting wire with bolt cutters, the snip lost in the wind, Bear covering with a suppressed nod. They slipped inside, boots soft on concrete, the dim interior lit by flickering fluorescence that buzzed like trapped insects. In a back office, amid filing cabinets and scattered blueprints, they found her, Erin Hart, bound to a chair, her face bruised but defiant, eyes flashing recognition as Wade burst through the door. "Grim," she breathed, voice hoarse from disuse, the sound a lifeline across the years. He cut her free with steady hands, the ropes falling like shed chains, while Bear secured the room. No time for words, just a fierce embrace that bridged the lost decade. Her whisper confirming what the drive had revealed. Sadie, their daughter, the living proof of that fleeting summer. Alarms wailed suddenly, Hale's men converging, footsteps echoing like thunder, but the club moved as one. Erin supported between them, the USB's copies already en route to Lena's lawyer contact via encrypted drop. The escape was chaos distilled to precision. Engines roaring to life in the yard, bullets pinging off metal but finding no mark, the riders weaving through the maze of crates like wolves evading hounds. Wade glanced back once, Erin's grip tight on his waist, the warehouse shrinking in the mirrors as they hit the open road. Hale's empire teetered, the evidence a noose tightening. But victory tasted bittersweet. Redemption earned in the roar of loyalty, the promise fulfilled under a clearing sky. Yet as thunder rumbled anew, Wade knew the final stand awaited. Hale's desperation, a storm yet to break. For family, chosen and blood, they'd ride it out, honor their unyielding light. The highway blurred into a streak of grey under the tires, the convoy's engines a thunderous chorus cutting through the mist-shrouded dawn. Wade gripped the handlebars tighter, Erin's arms locked around his waist, her breath ragged against his back but steadying with each mile. The warehouse's alarms faded behind them, swallowed by the rising sun that pierced the clouds like a judgment rendered. Rain-slicked asphalt gleamed, reflecting the Harley's chrome in fleeting flashes, while the scent of wet earth and exhaust mingled in the whipping wind. Bear led the pack, his broad silhouette a beacon, with Jax and Marco flanking to cover any pursuit. No headlights trailed yet, but Wade felt the shadow of Hale's desperation closing in. The man's empire, built on lies and stolen futures, wouldn't crumble without a fight. Erin's voice rose over the roar, faint but fierce. "Sadie, she's safe." Wade nodded, shouting back without turning, the words a vow etched in the rush of air. "With Lena, clubhouse lockdown, we're bringing you home." Home. The word hung, bridging the chasm of years, the photo's promise now flesh and blood pressing against him. She'd aged into quiet strength, her once laughing eyes shadowed by bruises that spoke of rough handling, not defeat. The USB's secrets burned in his vest pocket, copies already dispatched through Lena's secure channels to the lawyer, a retired judge with a grudge against badges gone rogue. Exposure was their weapon, truth the blade that would sever Hale's grip without spilling more than necessary. They hit the compound gates at mid-morning, the iron barriers swinging wide under Marco's watchful eye. The air inside hummed with readiness, reinforced barricades, riders on the walls, the faint crackle of radios linking to town contacts. Sadie burst from the hall as Wade cut the engine, her sneakers skidding on gravel, eyes wide with a mix of fear and hope. "Mom!" The cry shattered the tension, and Erin dismounted, legs unsteady but arms open, pulling her daughter into an embrace that blurred the lines of time. Wade stood back, the scene unfolding like a frame from a half-remembered dream, the wolf tattoo peeking from his sleeve, a silent witness to the family reforming in the dust. Sadie's small hand reached out, tugging him in, and for the first time, Wade allowed the pull, his calloused palm enveloping hers, the shared dimple a quiet confirmation of blood's unbreakable tie. Bear gathered them in the hall, the oak table now a war map of final moves. The space smelled of strong coffee and oiled leather, sunlight slanting through reinforced windows to illuminate the spread, printed files from the drive, timelines circling Hale's name like a tightening loop. "He's cornered," Bear rumbled, his voice an anchor in the storm. Words spreading, our contacts filing with the state oversight by noon. But Hale'll try one last play. Warehouse scouts reported incoming, his crew, armed with bluster and badges. Erin's additions filled gaps she'd pieced together in captivity, Hale's taunts about silencing her, the brown folder's remnants he'd burned in rage. "He thought I was alone," she said, voice steady, glancing at Wade with eyes that held no blame, only the spark of that diner night. "But you came back." The assault came at noon, under a sky clearing to harsh blue, the rumble of trucks echoing from the ridge like an ill wind. Hale himself led, stepping from a black SUV with deputies in tow, his silver tongue now twisted in fury. Face flushed under the brim of his hat. "Hand over the woman and the girl," he bellowed through a megaphone, the compound's gates a barrier between his false authority and their truth. "This is official business. Interfering's a felony." His men fanned out, rifles glinting, but the black timber held firm. No shots fired, just the steady line of riders on the walls, engines idling like growling guardians. Wade stepped forward with Bear, Sadie and Erin shielded behind the hall's bulk, the air thick with the tang of tension and sun-baked pine. "You're done, Hale," Wade called, his voice carrying clear, amplified by the moral weight of the moment. He held up a tablet, streaming live to the lawyer's feed, files uploading in real time, contracts and ledgers exposing the graft that had starved towns of fair roads, funneled millions to shadows. "Your deals, your signatures, it's all out. State troopers en route. Step down clean, or the truth buries you." Hale's smirk cracked, eyes darting as sirens wailed in the distance. Not his, but the cavalry of justice finally roused. His deputies shifted, whispers rippling. Loyalty bought could be sold back. One by one they lowered weapons, the web unraveling under the light of exposure. Hale lunged forward, rage twisting his features, but Bear's presence loomed, unyielding, a wall of honor that needed no force. The sheriff's empire folded like cheap tin under pressure. Hale was cuffed by his own men. The convoy of state vehicles arriving to haul him away, the compound's gates closing on the chaos with a resonant clang. No blood spilled, just the poetic justice of a system turning on its rot. Erin's testimony, bolstered by the club's unshakable word, sealing the indictments that would echo through courts for years. As the dust settled, Wade knelt before Sadie and Erin, the three forming a circle in the gravel's warmth. "I walked away once," he said, voice rough with emotion, the wolf tattoo bared like a confession. "Won't again. Promise kept." Erin's hand found his, Sadie's squeezing tight, the family chosen and born weaving into one under the desert sun. Days blurred into healing rhythms, the clubhouse a haven of shared meals and quiet stories, Lena tending bruises with gentle hands, Jax tuning bikes for rides that now carried laughter. Wade traded solitary trails for family runs, the road no longer an escape but a path forward. Redemption wasn't a destination but this, the honor of standing, the legacy of promises that outlasted storms. As evening fell, stars emerging like old friends, Wade watched Sadie chase fireflies in the yard. Erin at his side, the photo from that rainy night now framed on the mantel. The Black Timber's code had held, loyalty's fire illuminating the shadows, proving that in a world of broken oaths, one kept vow could rebuild worlds. Thank you for riding this journey with us. Stories like Grimm's are fueled by hearts like yours. If it touched you, hit subscribe and turn on notifications. We've got more tales of honor and redemption rolling out soon. Drop a comment. What promise would you keep no matter the cost?